On July 1st, new insurance requirements went into place in Ontario, which will hurt cyclists. Most statutory accident benefits are now optional. That means policies are no longer automatically required to include benefits such as income replacement, non-earner benefits, caregiver benefits, housekeeping assistance, or death and funeral benefits. These changes are especially concerning for pedestrians, cyclists, and passengers who do not own a vehicle and are not covered under a family member's auto insurance policy. Under the new rules, optional benefits generally only cover the policyholder, their spouse, their dependents, and drivers listed on the policy. That means an unrelated cyclist or pedestrian may not be entitled to the striking driver's income replacement or other optional benefits, even if the driver purchased them. Imagine you're out walking or cycling with your child and a driver strikes you. If neither you nor your child is covered under an applicable auto policy of your own, you may now be left without many of the financial supports that were previously available through the accident benefits system. In other words, people who do not own cars may have less control over the protection available to them after being injured by one. Today, I wanted to bring Dave Shellnut, aka the biking lawyer, onto the show to discuss these changes. Dave started his law firm in 2020 to assist cyclists injured in traffic violence. Since then, his firm has assisted hundreds of cyclists get the compensation they deserve. My name is Christopher Chesson. Welcome to Toronto, the Politics, the show. Dave, the biking lawyer, thanks so much for joining me today. Where are we, by the way?
Chris, my pleasure. We're in Dufferin Grove Park, a real popular spot in Toronto. Been the center of some great things. No Child Left Behind concerts, encampment protection, you name it. This park's seen it all.
And I think, this is the first podcast that we have an audience for as well. That's very exciting. So, Dave, one of the benefits that I thought that lawyers had was the ability to, buy a fancy car and drive like an asshole around downtown. So why become the biking lawyer? How did you get into this line of, specialty?
I maybe traded the fancy car for a numerous and plentiful set of bikes.
I appreciate our stage picture back here, by the way. It's very, how many bikes are you at right now? Are you comfortable sharing?
Yeah, it's like easy 6.
Good, but you probably need another.
I got almost talked into it the other day.
Yeah, N+1 is the appropriate amount.
For sure.
So the real reason I want to bring you on the show today is that there have been some pretty dramatic changes to how insurance works, specifically for cyclists who might be involved in any sort of collision. Could you tell me what those changes are?
Yeah, we're going to blow everybody's mind and talk about insurance today, but it's actually super important. What has happened is that in Ontario, if you get in a crash with a motor vehicle as a pedestrian, passenger, or driver, or cyclist, e-biker, you name it, automatic no-fault benefits kick in, and these provide medical supports. They provide income supports. If you're knocked out of school for a bit, they help you with your tuition. If you're retired, you get a bit of money as well. And everything from PSW to I need a new shower bar, that kind of thing is covered. And everybody's had equal access to that for the most part until July 1st. And now what the government has done in the name of savings is taken away tens of thousands of dollars in individual benefits by making the optional benefits apply to the income, the school fees, the goddamn funeral costs for people who lose loved ones. So unless you have your own auto policy where you've said, yep, I want to keep these optional benefits, then automatically if you're involved in a collision with a car as a cyclist, pedestrian, you're going to get the mandatory benefits but not the optional. You have no access to income support. It's wild.
At a time where so many more people are choosing to go car-free, this feels like a very surprising change to be made. What do you think the motivation was for these sorts of changes in statutory benefits?
I mean, cash rules everything around me. The insurance companies hoping to make some money, the provincial government looking for some easy political points because they know people are very focused on the here and now, and you say, I'm going to save you some money, and they're not providing information on what the long-term pain from that small amount of savings will be. I think the Globe and Mail looked into it, not to shout at another broadcaster, but I
would love if I was competing with the Globe and Mail.
it's like $100 a year you can maybe save by cutting out these benefits. But like if you actually had to use them, it could be tens of thousands of dollars a year. And I mean, $100,000 plus over a lifetime of income benefits. So like, even drivers who select to not have these things, it's a real problem.
So even if there's many drivers out there who might be choosing now to not take that optional insurance, and then they'll be perhaps in a bike collision in the future, and they could be affected too.
Well, or they're hitting their car.
Yeah.
If they get a rear ender on the 401 or something in their vehicle, their motor vehicle, and they need to access these things, if they've said, I want to save $6 a month, they're not going to get that $400 a week in income benefits. And we talked about like what kind of time this is we're living in. Like, people are having a tough time paying for their housing, paying for their groceries, paying all sorts of bills. $400 a week isn't a lot, but what I've seen is my clients who can access that, it means the difference in a lot of cases of keeping your roof over your head, of being able to pay your mortgage. So not having access to this is going to be, people are going to be left in the lurch, unless you're like privileged enough to have short and long-term disability at work. Like, you're going to have to look at all sorts of other options, and they're not going to be easy to get.
So often, I think for most of us, what we see is the headline of a cyclist has been, hopefully the headline says hit by the driver, more often hit by a car, just apparently, some sort of Stephen King novel, autonomously hitting folks without a driver. We see that headline, and then we don't see what comes after it. What do you think people might not recognize about the reality of being the victim of one of these incidents of traffic violence? What's that on the ground experience like? What do you hear from your clients who suffer something like this?
I think, Chris, that a lot of people who have gone through injury and recovery or gone through sort of chemo and had to, how long recovery takes. So I don't think that's an unknown for folks. But if you're hit by a motor vehicle on your bike, chances are you've suffered an orthopedic injury, and chances are you got some like trauma, some mental health trauma, because it's pretty scary. I know when I was hit, when my bones healed, but I still had the psychological trauma from it, and that costs money beyond the OHIP system to go to physio once a week. It costs money to get psychotherapy treatment. That's not covered by OHIP, like beyond an appointment with a psychiatrist. But like this kind of trauma requires weekly, bi-weekly care for a couple months, and that's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So I think what people should think about is the length of time it takes to recover, like especially if you throw a surgery on your clavicle in the mix, and then the cost of that weekly physiotherapy. Many of us have benefits through our work, and we know we've got $500 cap on that. How many appointments is that?
And when you consider the demographics of folks who are maybe more likely to be cycling right now, they're not going to have existing coverage. They're often contractors, they're gig workers, or they're folks working for an hourly position where the benefits are not very substantial. So it feels like a change like this is affecting a population that's already in a position where they don't have as much power over their own future.
For sure. We see a lot of cases of folks doing gig work, as you said, or guys early morning heading to the construction site on their like e-scooter or e-bike. This is frequent, and we see, or people going to work to serve behind the bar. These kind of claimants are people we see a lot, and they don't have the supports that someone who maybe works for Scotiabank or for City of Toronto would have. But even me as a lawyer, when I was involved in a pretty terrible assault about 6 years ago now, and I was out of it. My family was looking like, how are we going to pay the mortgage and all these bills? And it turns out that even though I was at a law firm and I had physio benefits, I didn't have short-term and long-term disability. And like, I had never known about that. I was early in my career. So even people with like what you would call more like or more mainstream jobs or things you would expect to have certain coverages, you really got to look, because oftentimes employers won't spend that extra couple bucks a month to get you the short-term income coverage.
So is that what's called the short-term income coverage? Is that what people should be looking for?
So that's a big reason Doug Ford said we should do away with these benefits, is because we don't want people to have double coverage. It's a waste of everybody's money. So some people through their employers have short-term disability and long-term disability, or they just have long-term disability or none. And look at me, I was a lawyer at a law firm in Toronto and I didn't have either. So yeah, people should really look into that, but it's been used as the excuse to get rid of these income benefits on the auto insurance side. And I think it's a bit of it's untrue. Like not everybody has this at their jobs.
It's seems like I think something you see a lot in the Ford government is making decisions based off of what Ford is personally hearing from the people who are closest to him. Folks who are maybe doing very well, don't need to worry too much about these sorts of surprises. And how can you ensure that those folks who are already in a position of privilege don't have to pay any additional amount to take care of folks who don't have that sort of benefit? If we maybe took a step back to view the city of Toronto, how do you evaluate the safety of cyclists today? Where do you think Toronto is at? How do you think things have changed maybe over the past couple of years? And what would you like to see in the future?
Yeah, I think I've been biking to work probably for 10 years now, and I think we've come a long way. Seems to suggest that we've done really well, but I think we've done a reasonable job at putting safe infrastructure in some of the key areas. We haven't done a great job in connecting those key areas. So I, is it a C+ or a B-? I don't know.
It's a long hike up to base camp, but to make it to the peak of Everest is still going to be a lot more work.
Yeah, and frankly, we're seeing, up until 2 years ago, we were seeing decent movement, but now that's stopped.
Why do you think that is?
Well, Doug Ford has put a chilling effect, even though Cycle Toronto has thus far beat him in court and he can't rip out our bike lanes. Him going after people on bikes and declaring a war on bikes has put a chilling effect. Municipalities across the province are not creating bike safety plans, and they're not following through on stuff they said they would do. You look up at Eglinton for that. You see things on Marley that should have been put in place that haven't. Had Doug Ford not taken this swing at vulnerable road users, I think we would probably be really far ahead of where we are right now.
It feels as though it has also inflamed the broader culture war, the war on cars. And I can only imagine, I'm sure you get this too. It feels like on a daily basis, I have someone DMing me, telling me they're going to look for my bike so that they can hit me. When you see that online, how could that not negatively impact people's willingness to get out onto the streets? When you hear your leaders saying that you're not someone we really need to be caring about protecting.
Well, I think it has. And I know when the talk of ripping out the bike lanes was really in full steam, there's a bit of a pause on it right now while the courts decide. But people were coming to me frequently saying, if they rip out the bike lanes, I'm not biking. I'll jump in my car or take TTC. So yeah, that will and sort of has happened. But the attitude out there on the roads is really something right now.
Do you feel as though drivers are acting more aggressively?
I would say there's a certain set of people who feel emboldened to swear at you, to turn into you on purpose. And so there's that. But I do think that ever since the pandemic, people are stressed, they're hyper-focused on their individual self, they're taking chances across the board and being selfish across the board. And that's played out, on our roads. But then you add this, hey, it's okay to tell a biker off. The majority of people aren't probably going to do that. But if they see, I see this all the time. I know you see me, and if you know the rules of the road, you wait till I pass. But you don't care, and I'm lesser than you. And the premier has said that, so you're going to cut in front of me so that I have to brake and wait for your for you to make this turn. I see that a lot. It's not like someone's not running me down on purpose, but they're like devaluing my position on the roadway.
And it doesn't feel as though we have a police service which is treating every user of the road with the same rubric. It feels as though that cyclists are maybe being held to a different standard than drivers.
I think that has always been in the case in Toronto, and I know that in the early critical mass days before I ever was here, there was a lot of police harassment, but we have seen that throughout the pandemic too in High Park. We've seen it recently on the Martin Goodman Trail. I would say there, like, I could give you like a dozen
the
wild
incident that
stories.
went viral as well.
Yeah, there's
recently,
that.
yeah.
Like, you know, I've got a case right now where a police officer doored my client.
Really?
And then the cop who showed up on the scene wrote the report in such a way as to blame my client,
Wow.
who has the right of way and who was doored. And turns out this same officer is one I'd filed a complaint against 6 months ago for handing my cyclist a ticket for not wearing a helmet when she was left hooked in the bike lane and sent to the trauma unit at St. Mike's.
Wow.
And you don't have to wear it. You should wear a helmet, but it's not illegal to wear a helmet if you're over 18. But he had such an anti-cyclist bias that he went to the trauma unit, sat to make sure she was out of the ICU, and then handed the ticket. Like,
ridiculous.
And so we see this all the time. There are a few good apples. There's a few detectives in the hit and run squad and down at traffic services who do a fantastic job. But by and large, we got a systemic issue here with Toronto Police, and it isn't the only systemic issue they have.
What else are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's like, we do a lot of police violence work, and so we see a lot of anti-black racism in policing use, and the results of that being higher percentages of use of force incidents involving black folks and Indigenous folks. You'll see CTV reported on this story where a cop pulled over a black woman, allegedly for not stopping at a stop sign, and she was like, what? Like, I totally stopped. And anyway, she fought it all the way through, pulled video, and she stopped more than any person in a motor vehicle has ever stopped at a stop sign. You know, I'm like, wow, like, even when I'm driving a car, I'm not sure I stopped that much. And then overturned it, and then you see the notes, and he calls her belligerent, and there's this like there's an angry black woman trope in there. He like blatantly lied and sent her all these tickets. She had to fight like thankfully this is a woman, like, or a person with like guts, not guts is the wrong word, but like with a real determination and time, frankly, to stand up for herself and be brave in that situation, which is quite scary, dealing with police, to fight it, or else she would have been penalized. But that's just like one of many examples we see here.
Going through that process, trying to find justice after you were the victim of something like that, there's a broader issue in the courts and how these cases are dealt with individually or as a category. You know, what would you want to see to make cyclists have better protections? What are the sort of, you know, human rights conversations? How can it be something that it's not incumbent? You know, I'd hate to damage your business too much, but you would hope that we would live in a world where it didn't require these things to be fought on a case-by-case basis. How is there any way for cyclists to have more rights on this? Or what are things that maybe cyclists can do themselves so that if they are in that situation, they're better prepared?
Yeah, I mean, what we always said when we started the business, Chris, is that, like, we would love to put ourselves out of a job. You know, like, I'd bike my kid to daycare every day, and I'm like, it's fantastic, it's lovely, but I'm also terrified, you know, and like, it shouldn't be like that. It's not there's not a silver bullet to do it. I always think of it as three different things. The laws have got to treat driving as a privilege and not a right. And I mean, you do something egregious, and it doesn't have to be drinking and driving, but you lose your license. And you have to prove to us that you should get it back.
That people can get their license and then never have to go through any sort of testing, to be held to any higher standard ever again feels ridiculous.
I love my mom, but I use her as a good example. Like, she is 78 now. She got her license probably in like the Oakville area when
Yeah.
she was 16. What's that, like in the 50s or something? And then has never been tested again. And like she lives in Kitchener-Waterloo area now, and they've thrown in all these roundabouts, and like infrastructure has changed markedly, in Toronto as well. And like no one's ever given refresher courses on this stuff. Like, of course, crashes happen. If the insurance industry wanted to save money, they would invest in this kind of education, but that's obviously not what they want to do.
Learning how to drive, and where so many people get tested, I think people very deliberately choose to test in these more suburban, rural areas to be evaluated off of your driving ability in Orangeville and then go drive in downtown Toronto feels as connected to driving and learning how to fly a spaceship. They're completely different activities, and yet we treat them all the same.
Yeah, and I'll give you like a personal example of that, Chris. Like when I was turning 16, I heard that the testing facility in Guelph was very difficult. And they really put you through the ringer. And I said, Mom, I don't want to do that. I want to get my license. I want to go to Barrie and do it. And I went to Barrie and I got it, lickety split. But like, that was okay. Well, so that brings me to the second thing. We need tough law change, but we need a cultural shift. Yeah. Like my mom shouldn't have said okay to that. It's just like, no, you're going to go here. And if you fail the test, then you're going to practice more, and then you're going to do it here again until you're ready to drive. But like we give auto culture and driving this like primacy over almost everything here. It's the only thing you can do where you can like run down and kill somebody and like get a slap on the wrist as opposed to jail time. We really treat it differently. So we need like a cultural shift. There's the law, we need the cultural shift, and we need cities to invest in like education infrastructure.
The province is playing their ads, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. Let's make Ontario safer. I can only imagine, I'm sure the numbers bear this out, that the most common source of injury and any safety issue will be a collision in this province.
Certainly the biggest drain on OHIP, biggest drain on businesses. Like, think of all these small businesses who have someone knocked out for 6 months. Like, what's that on their productivity? And then like extrapolate that over many communities, over the province, and like what does that do to our economic health? It's wild. That we don't treat this as endemic as it is.
As a public health crisis that's being experienced, but it feels as though we've created this culture where the car is the extension of the self. And I think kind of critically it fits into a certain thing that people really want to believe, which is that through their access to capital, they can improve their ability to interact with the world. That, I've made a lot of money, I can spend this money, and that by virtue of spending this money, that enables me to be more mobile, to be more powerful in this world. And I think that's why people, when, you feel scared, you feel a little insecure, it's no wonder now that people are opting to purchase these, consumer grade tanks because they feel scared of the world. And, they're also hearing, I think, a lot of things from a lot of folks that it is unsafe in Toronto. It is unsafe in the city. It is unsafe. Like, you need to protect yourself. You need this giant vehicle or else your kids might be at risk. And as much as this is a policy issue, as much of it's an infrastructure issue, there's this emotional, this spiritual issue that is affecting people as well. There's fear. And I don't know that person who has been driving their entire life, who views that their vehicle, who, you can see their Instagram page, it's photos and photos of them hanging out with their car. Not usually many photos of them with friends and family, but it's a different conversation. Are those people lost, do you think? Do you think that those the car brains, to maybe use the pejorative, is there anything that can be done to salvage them? Or do you think it's more about getting the next generation on board?
I think it's not about targeting the individual or maybe even the collective consciousness. We have to go around it. It's like they say if you want to end car crashes, you don't target driver behavior. You engineer out the problem because you can't. People are going to make mistakes and do dumb shit, but if you make it physically impossible to do that, it's going to be a much better solution. And maybe that goes for that as well. If we at the higher level and then collectively say that no, we're gonna really focus on mass transit, and it's gonna get you here way better than it would have in your car by yourself, and there's all these reasons to do it, and here they are, and it's undeniable. I mean, if we really believed in that, we could do that. But I do what I do for a living. I'm talking to people like you who know a ton about this stuff, and I think that way too. I'm I have a 2.5-year-old, and I know how people drive. I know what people do to my clients. I want her in a tank. Jesus, it's so cyclical.
And I think maybe the lesson that I would hope more counselors would learn is that, anytime any sort of pro-urban, pro-safety infrastructure comes in, you are immediately besieged by an army of drivers saying that this is going to fundamentally disrupt how they get to work. It's going to disrupt, they're getting their kids to school. And I think that can be very frightening for the decision makers to hear this onslaught. And I don't know if it's about making sure there's a suitable opposition to that in the positive to make them feel as though that they have support when they are making these pro-safety changes. But it also needs to be, the vocal opposition when they don't make those. And it's very frustrating, I think, to see a city council, which is, like you're saying, this chilling effect has occurred. I would look towards Brad Bradford very specifically as someone who is... So Brad Bradford, let me tell you about this man. He's very interesting. He once had the support of the cycling community, and I don't know what changed. If he stopped liking how he looked in spandex, or what it was. He decided to change his perspective completely. I don't know. Not to get too into the politics specifically. Yeah. Do you have an opinion on that? I feel like you and Bradford might have some history, perhaps.
Yeah, I think Brad got what he needed from people on bikes and got him into office. And then he just tried to catch the next wave of whatever is popular and whatever could get him into another level of power. It's his pure ego and self-interest. There's nothing to do with community or constituents or anything like that. So I don't know. He's a real bad example, but it's also a good example of where our politics are at. Politicians get look at the High Park thing, for example. There has been such a backlash from a vocal minority to really stop some incredible developments of a park on flimsy arguments. Really wild stuff, but there's no political will. People are scared to make difficult, tough, and reasoned choices. Nothing happened after the defund the police push in 2020. People are scared of the police, politicians included. Look at Olivia Chow. She hasn't said anything, and that's because they're going to run a $20 million ad campaign to get her not elected.
Absolutely.
I mean, I understand it. I don't agree with it, but we just don't. We don't have anybody with the political will or the political clout to do anything profound in this city, and that's why we're middling.
Middling. That's it. That's a tough, a tough dig at the city. Where do you think Canada, how do you think Toronto is doing compared to other Canadian cities? Are there examples you're maybe seeing, I suppose, in the Vancouver, Montreal? You even spoke a bit about Calgary's approach. Are there other examples you're seeing in other municipalities that you wish we were following?
Chris, I've got my head down so much in the trenches of what's going on in Southern Ontario that it's difficult for me to look up and see some of the other stuff that's going on. But you do hear whispers about what's happening in New York. You see what a leader with backing can do and implement and positively market to the rest, to his constituents. There are communities like Waterloo. I grew up in that area, and it was not a safe place to bike. It still isn't great now, but they have really done some great things. So there are possibilities. Hamilton, I think, in some ways does a good job. but it's a difficult time. You got a provincial government that's all powerful with their the municipalities being a creature of provincial statute, and so we're in a tough spot right now, I think.
To wrap things up, one question I ask everyone on the show is, are there any hidden gems in Toronto, like something in the neighborhood that you think more people, local business maybe, you'd hope that people would take advantage of? Chris,
that's such a good question. I would say, like, they're endless. I didn't realize them until I started riding a bike in Toronto. I lived here for 6 years before I ever picked up a bike. TTC forced me to. I'd never seen Toronto Island. I'd never gone to the cafe on the island. I'd never seen bike down the alleyways that crisscross every neighborhood from here to the east side. I'd never really seen what Trinity Bellwoods is like on a beautiful summer day on the weekend. A hidden gem is like picking up your bicycle and exploring the city. That's when I fell in love with it.
Maybe this is my Gen Z is showing whenever I say this, but I always compare walking down a good street, to scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through Reels. And what a bad street is you're scrolling through and there's just black spots. There's a black square every time you scroll through. That's gap-tooth urbanism. There's a parking lot. And I find driving down these streets, it's like you're scrolling way too fast. You can't get anything at all. And when you're cycling, you actually have that time to engage with your environment, see what's going on. When I lived in Calgary, I think I might have been, the only person in my demographic. I worked for an oil and gas company who didn't own a car. And, I'd walk an hour back and forth from the office to my apartment every day, and it was joyful. You're outside. Yeah. The exact same amount of time that many people, driving in from those exurbs would do, but they would show up pissed off, stressed, no parking, there was traffic. And I think a lot of people would be surprised by how much better their day would get if they were willing just to put their car away and figure out how they could get there using active mobility or public transport. Anything you'd like to plug? I understand you're a lawyer.
No, obviously we represent folks across Ontario who've been injured in bike crashes or in, everything from your slip and falls to police violence. If something happens on your bike and you just want to understand your rights, just give us a call.
Yeah, I think maybe just like, what does that look like? Because I think I've been, I've had issues before where I was, had an injury, I slipped, and you don't even think I feel like a lot of people think maybe the bar to get in contact with a lawyer might be a lot higher than it actually is. Like, what is that onboarding experience like for you?
Yeah, I think that can be the case at some of these bigger shops, but we built our firm on community, and so we're very connected with it. I can't tell you the number of phone calls we get from cyclists in collisions every day, but it is shocking, especially this time of year.
I bet you have better stats in terms of what the real numbers are than many of the public sources are.
Yeah, because thankfully a lot of people I talk to have got road rash or sore neck, and that wouldn't be classified on the KSI stats that you see in Toronto, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens and probably hundreds of those every month. But yeah, so we talk to a lot of, you call the firm, you're going to talk to a person, and we're going to tell you straight up, like you have a case because you have a serious clavicle fracture and you need surgery, or like, hey, thank goodness you don't need us, but you should definitely access the accident benefits to get the minor injury supports and be back on your bike in a month.
Thank you, Dave, the biking lawyer, for coming onto the show. Hopefully you'll never have to give him a call, but if you do, he'll treat you right. Thank you for listening to Toronto, the Politics, the show. If you think that local news is important and liked what you just heard, please consider leaving a review, following the show on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, or sending your favorite episode to your favorite person. My name is Christopher Chesson. Please take care of each other.